While I was away, I had several requests to go through a game by the young Chinese star Wei Yi. This was an incredible game. Played just a few days ago in the Hainan Danzhou Grandmaster tournament being played in China against the Cuban player Lazaro Bruzon Batista. Many people have already described this game as an immortal. Well, let's take a look at it and you can decide. So first of all, Wei Yi with the white pieces, it's a standard shavening, and here white can play a4, but the other main line is queen e1, so transferring the queen over to the king side straight away. And black exchanges. Now all these moves have been seen hundreds of times before, if not thousands of times before. So white transfers the queen over, bishop hits that pawn on e4, so now there's a serious threat to play b4. White prevents that, and the rook comes to d8, and that really forestalls white's idea of playing e5, because then the bishop would be on prise. White switches the rook over. Now, of course, if knight takes pawn, then queen g7 would be mate, so black can't take there immediately. Rook d7, quite a mysterious move. In fact, seen many times before. The idea is sometimes that bishop can drop back to d8 and then e5 comes in. Sometimes the queen drops back to d8. Sometimes black even doubles on the d file. But this has almost become the main move in the position. White plays bishop d3, so the bishop looking towards h7, of course, in the Sicilian and many other king's pawn openings. That bishop on d3 is the attacking piece. Now rook e8 is the most popular move here, but queen d8 was played, but this has also been seen before. So the idea is to, well, put some more pressure on the d file. So again, it's working against this move e5. e5 is really the move that white wants to play to open up that bishop, drive away the knight from f6, open up the line of the bishop. And sometimes that queen on d8 can help even with an exchange sacrifice. Queen h3, good move. So white is still looking at that pawn on h7. Now the most popular move in this position was g6, and this was played in the game, but instinctively that is a move I do not like at all. I would prefer to play h6, and this has also been played. I think this is a more reliable move, but okay, that leads the game into very different paths. g6 I really dislike. That weakens dark squares around black's king, and after f5, then I think f5 really hits the nail on the head. Well, first of all, there's a threat to take on e6. But you can see that with the pawn on g6, it's not possible for black to keep the position closed now. And I think this move really highlights the weak squares on the f-file. So, as I said, I think g6 is just a bad move. e5 played to close the position to a certain extent, so you can see that that bishop is locked in to some extent, but as we'll see, Wei Yi finds a way to open the diagonal for that bishop. And here this is already difficult. White wants to play the bishop into h6, then the rook will have to relinquish the f-file, and then that means that white can attack those weak points down the f-file. So already really unpleasant. I mean, I think knight h5 is perhaps an idea, perhaps to offer a pawn with knight f4 and at least get rid of that dangerous dark squared bishop. Rook e8 was played. This position, incredibly, to my eyes, has been seen before, and white has done pretty well with this move rook e2 with the simple idea of doubling on the f-file, and I think that's already highly unpleasant for black. But Wei Yi went a different way, and as we'll see, his way was fantastically strong. He exchanged on g6. Now I think this will leave black's king just too exposed here. So h takes g6 from a positional point of view looks correct, but it's these chronic weaknesses on the king side that are a problem. Now knight d5 was played. Now this is the first new move in the position, and it, as we're going to see, is unbelievably strong. Now many people were speculating whether this was some kind of opening preparation. I suspect not, actually. I suspect this was over the board inspiration. Now objectively the best move is to exchange bishop for knight, but this leaves black in a really, really difficult situation. All white's pieces are playing here, and it's very hard to untangle, and you know, white has so many different possibilities to sacrifice. Instead, Bruzon played knight takes knight. Now if this is recaptured, then bishop d5 covers f7, the bishop joins the defence on the king's side, and that is certainly playable for black. But of course this was not Wei Yi's intention. He sacrificed the rook on f7. Now this is actually a very standard kind of sacrifice in these Scheveningen positions. The idea is to drag black's king up the board. So, you know, no marks for originality here. Of course, capturing is the only possible way for black. So white checks, and the idea is to drag black's king up the board. Very standard. Now if the king goes back, then of course that's checkmate. So the king really has to come up the board. White captures. Now if bishop takes, then this is very, very easy. So queen f7 mate threatened. That's an only move, and now it's very simple just to force the king over, and that's checkmate. So king takes d5. Now here's where it gets tricky. The king wants to drop back to c6. So for example, a careless check here would allow king c6, and now black's king surrounded by all its pieces. Well, black is just a rook up for nothing there. Here's where it starts to get brilliant. First of all, he buys himself some time. Bishop e4 check. Now this has to be taken. The king can't go back. It'll be checkmated very easily. The king has to take this. So this has dragged black's king further towards white's army. And here's a beautiful move. Queen f7. So first of all, we should say that queen f3 checkmate is threatened, but also it controls d5, preventing black's king from retreating. I should also say that there is another way to win this position. If you flick on your computer in this position, it will immediately spurt out the move c4. Incredibly, this also wins. This is very beautiful, that the main idea is after pawn takes pawn, now check, and the king actually doesn't escape to the queen side, because in that position that's checkmate. Incredible. I mean, there are other variations, but that's the main idea. But queen f7 played. Excuse me, just 1 second. And in many ways I find this more elegant, actually. So this queen just performs so many different roles here. So queen f3 mate threatened. Bishop f6 has to be played because of that. Now bishop d2 check. Wei Yi clearly isn't sure what to do here, because he actually repeats moves. So, I mean, that I think gives a clear indication that this was not some kind of computer preparation, but this was inspiration at the board. And now he hits upon the right idea. Another very subtle queen move, queen b3. So the idea is queen d3 checkmate is threatened, but it still controls d5, preventing the king from retreating. So this is really subtle stuff. So the king has to move back, king f5. And now we make sure that the king comes forward again with that check. And now once again, a brilliant move. The queen moves to d3, threatening two checkmates. One is queen g6, and that will lead to mate, and the other is queen e2 check, will also lead to mate. For example, well let's prevent one of them with rook g7. Queen check. I mean, this finish is actually quite prosaic. h3 threatens queen g4. That has to be defended. Now king h2 threatens g3 mate. Only way to prevent that is bishop g2. And now, well, we just mop up. Basically, there is no defence here. First of all, we get the queen to a better position, and then rook g1 threatens all kinds of things. Well, bishop f2 for starters, and rook g4, and yeah, basically that's mate. So queen d3. I mean, this is so subtle. Black came up with bishop takes pawn check. That gets taken, and queen check. Okay, you've got to be careful here. But actually, the king drops back, and queen e2 and queen g6 are still threatened. Not to mention rook f6 in some positions is going to kill as well. So actually, this bishop sacrifice has only delayed the end. For example, if, well, let's say e4, then check, rook f4, we can do this by force here, and queen f3 is mate. Or king h5, we check, and then simply taking on f6 and queen g5. So bishop g5 was played, queen e2, we're getting closer now, and almost there. Let's drag the black king a little further forward, and after bishop e1, actually black resigned. Well, let me see. Rook f3 is one threat. Queen d3 is another. If bishop f4, well, let's find a clean mate. Queen d3, check. I mean, this queen is just working overtime. It's just incredible. Let's drag the king forward again, and that is checkmate. I mean, this game really demonstrates the power of the queen. It's just fantastic. So, is this an immortal game? Well, it's not bad, is it? I'm not sure I would put it in that category. What I think it does do is that it heralds the emergence of a new star. I don't think we'll forget the name of Wei Yi now. He's only 16 years old. At the moment he's number 32 on the live rating list, but really at the age of 16 and able to produce games like that, that's something very special. And now personally, I think if you look at, I mean, if I compare this with other king hunts, classic king hunts, then I don't think this is quite as good as, for example, Kasparov's game against Topalov from Vaikonze 1999. You can see that on the Kasparov playlist on this YouTube, on the Power Play Chess YouTube channel. Well, you can compare and contrast and see what you think, because I think Kasparov's had a bit more, a little bit more originality, and I don't think he didn't really foresee the end, but this comes pretty close. And I think aesthetically I like this very much. I think these queen moves, queen f7, queen b3 and queen d3, these are the really elegant moves. But anyway, you decide for yourself. Brilliant stuff.